Miss Nigel, are you there? Miss Nigel, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, thank you. Why don't you give the audience, tell us your part in the show and what inspired you to do it?
Yeah, so Earlonne and I are the co-creators, co-hosts, and co-producers of Ear Hustle. And we've been working together for a couple years on a radio project inside San Quentin. And we wanted to try to do a different kind of project that would allow us to do longer form storytelling, use more music, and be more creative and work more like artists instead of journalists. And so together we came up with the idea of Ear Hustle.
Okay, and why San Quentin, such a notorious, tough prison? Why San Quentin of all prisons?
Well, it's interesting. San Quentin has that reputation, and certainly at some point it was a really notorious and tough prison, but it's now a level 2 prison, which means it's a medium security. And so the vibe has really changed there. And I think also because it's in the Bay Area, there's a lot of programs that happen in there and a lot of volunteers that go in. So it's actually, in terms of a prison, a pretty progressive one. Certainly there's a lot of prisons that wouldn't allow a project like Ear Hustle to happen. So I think in some ways it's a surprising place for people.
And how has their support been for inmates? Are they supporting the show? Or?
How has the support been for the other incarcerated men in terms of Ear Hustle? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Are they supportive of it, or are they
it's great. We've had really wonderful feedback, and one of the things that makes me really happy is when guys come up and tell us that their family and friends are able to listen to it, and it helps make them feel less alone, and also gives them a better idea of what's happening to their loved ones inside of prison. So that's really gratifying, and we're trying to include as many men as we can in the storytelling and in the process of making the podcast to make it as inclusive as possible.
Okay, and what do you want the viewers or the listeners, that watch the show to take away from it?
Well, there's a couple things, and obviously if you asked Earlonne, he would have some different things to say, but for me, the 3 basic things are, 1, to give people a much more realistic view of who's inside prison, and get an idea of the humanity that's in there, and the talented people, and trying to figure out a way how incarcerated people can become contributing citizens even though they're locked up. 2, I hope that Earlonne and I can mirror the idea for people that inside and outside people can work together as equal colleagues with respect and can push each other to be the best that we can be. And I hope ultimately that our stories are going to get people to not only question, but pitch in and help figure out how do we change the sentencing structures in the United States, how do we make prisons more about rehabilitation and not just about punishment, and how do we address the insane sentences that people are being given that are really disproportionate.
Now, are there any other shows like this in the country?
Not that I know of. I know that there's other stories that are coming out of prison, and there's other, kind of one-time podcasts. But as far as I know, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, Ear Hustle is the only podcast that is produced completely inside a prison on a regular basis. So all the editing, all the sound design, all the interviewing, everything happens inside of the prison.
Okay. Do you have any experience working in prisons?
Well, I started as a volunteer inside San Quentin in 2011 as a professor teaching at the Prison University Project. And I did that for almost 2 years. And that's how I became acquainted with San Quentin, and that's how I met the guys that I work with. So it's been going on 7 years that I've been going in there.
Okay, so California is one of the 28 states with the 3 strikes law.
Yes.
And it applies even for minor crimes.
Yep.
Have you met anyone that was a victim of this 3 strikes law?
Earlonne, my co-host, is.
Oh, okay.
He's serving, oh my goodness, I think it's 20, he's going to be upset, 28 years to life for attempted second-degree robbery. It's awful. A lot of the men that I work with are 3 strikes victims, and that's something we really hope people are going to look at. I mean, it's just insane.
Okay, so how how will the show, basically, how will it show realism, but destroying the myths of inmates? How will you want to keep it real, but you want to destroy the myths that are associated with inmates?
Well, I hope that we're keeping it real by letting guys tell their own stories. We're giving them a voice. Of course, we edit it and we work with them, but we're letting people talk about their daily lives, not about the hype. We're not, concentrating on the kinds of stories that you see on, things like, I don't know what they're called, like Prison Break and things like that. We're talking about everyday life and how once you get into prison, you have to figure out how to make a life, how to survive, how to be productive. How do you educate yourself? How do you keep a family together? How do you have a job? How do you deal with health issues? So all the things that people on the outside deal with, the guys are dealing with inside. And I hope that by making that clear, it's going to get people who don't think about it already to think about who, these guys are no different than me, and we can't be letting this happen to our fellow citizens.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a recent PBS documentary on Rikers Island. Have you got a chance to see that?
I haven't, and I really need to see it. Yeah, unfortunately, I have not.
Okay, well, they're showing basically how guards and wardens, but mostly guards, and the people that work in these prisons, how they abuse the inmates, send them in hospitals, all kind of things. How will your show, will it address that, or will that affect access to the prison?
Well, we're trying to do stories that include correctional officers and administrators and all the other people that work at the prison. To be honest, I don't know how it would work if we did a story about potential abuse in the prison. That's something maybe we'll try to tackle in another season. But I'm also interested in there are good people who work in prison. I'm not being an apologist, but there's really supportive people and there's people who care about making change. And I'd like those voices to be heard because I'm hoping that those voices and their intent can have a stronger influence. I'm not talking about, putting, trying to brush things under the rug. Obviously, there is abuse that happens, but I'm not sure how we can address that. Acknowledge that it happens, and find ways to talk about it. But it's tough. I mean, that would be a tough story to do for us.
Mm-hmm. Which story has gotten the most attention and feedback? I know there's only a few episodes.
Yeah, well, I think the first story about Sully's that we played a clip from got a lot of attention because people were really surprised by it. It starts with that scary story about Ron Self, but it moves into much more humanizing stories. But I think the story that was the most shocking for people was the one we did about the segregated housing unit, where we interviewed 4 guys who collectively had spent over 60 years in the SHU. And one guy had spent 26 years, and I think that, for people who didn't know that exists in California, it was really eye-opening, very distressing to learn about that.
Okay. And later down the line, do you see the youth or the children listening to this show and maybe thinking twice about committing crimes or doing things?
I hope so. We did a story called Misguided Loyalty, and it was about a guy who was in a gang as a young man and the price that he paid for that, which was that he had killed a rival gang member, and in retaliation that gang killed his mother and his brother, and it happened 30 years ago. And it's, of course, a shocking story, and he really talks about, the mistakes he made as a young person. And Earlonne says, this is the type of story that every parent needs to sit down with their children and listen to and talk about it. And, I hope it makes a change. I mean, I know change is really difficult, but maybe our stories can be there as a tool for parents to listen to with their kids, and, let them know they understand what's happening and that these mistakes are going to, doing things like this is going to affect you for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. So it might be naive, but we're hoping that we can have some effect.
I just wanted to chime in and ask a question, and that question is, have you seen or noticed anything since you've started this particular program, any changes or even changes in behavior of some of the ones who have at least been on the program?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a sense of pride which is great. I mean, I think anybody, when they find something that challenges them creatively and intellectually, it just has, it gives you a sense of self-worth. And the idea that people are listening and responding and have questions, I think can't help but make the guys who participate feel like they matter. And, that's something I think everybody needs and everybody feels good about when they know that others care, especially people that don't necessarily know them. And so we've got a lot of guys who want to participate. I don't know how many episodes you've listened to, but we use all original music that's been composed and performed by the men inside. And we get so many comments on our website and through emails wanting to know more about these creative men. And it's great for the musicians that are part of it. It just, makes their day when I can come in and tell them, so-and-so wants to know more about you. There's requests to play all of your songs. And so I think that really helps. That's a morale booster. And I wish that, this could spread to other prisons and that we could be including more and more people in it. Because, self-worth is a really important thing.
Okay. Any more questions, Porter? Is that it?
Right now, I just want to say that my question will now turn into a statement, and I just want to say I thank you very much for not forgetting a certain population and for making things much more realistic to all of us. And I appreciate you, Brother Sam, as well. Important topic, important story.
Thank you. That's really wonderful to hear. And I wish some way Earlonne could hear this. It's really difficult because I'm on the outside. I get to do these interviews, and I want to always make it clear that I'm just speaking for me. I'm not speaking for Earlonne. And I hope that in the not-too-distant future, he's going to have the opportunity to be out and be able to speak for himself on the really important work that he's doing inside San Quentin.
I got one more question for you. Since you have previous experience in the prison industry, what would you say is the biggest myth with doing this show even? What would you say is the biggest myth just for us as outsiders?
That people in prison are uneducated, are monsters, have hard hearts. They've been completely demonized, and I understand that people go to prison for a reason, but what I found going in there was an incredible wealth of humanity and of sometimes wasted potential. And I think that if more people could understand that, there would be a significant change in how we deal with the prisons in the United States. So.
Okay, well, that'll do it. Why don't you give the listeners where they can find you at?
Thank you. Yes. So you can find us on iTunes. You can also go to our website, earhustlesq.com. We're on Twitter and Instagram, earhustle SQ, and we respond to all kinds of questions. We're really interested in listeners and having people get in touch with us. So if you have questions or comments, we love to hear from people.
All right. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.